I'm not angry anymore, not even hurt the way I used to be. I've bled all I had to bleed for him, in silence, in loyalty, in blind mother love. It's strange, you know. The moment it all broke wasn't a shouting match or some dramatic confrontation. No, it was quiet, cold, too quiet. He left me at a train station in Vermont. My own son, the boy I raised, the one I held when he was sick, the one I defended when teachers said he was too much, the one I gave up job interviews, vacations, even sleep for. He staged the whole thing, the invitation, the fake train ticket, the warm lies about birthday cakes and sugar cookies, all of it, just to make me feel wanted, right before discarding me like old luggage nobody wants to claim. He thought I'd fall apart, thought I'd weep, thought I'd beg to come home, but he forgot one thing. I buried my husband, alone. I stood by the casket and didn't collapse. I rebuilt my life from ashes once before. Compared to that, his betrayal was just a gust of wind. And I'd learned to stand in storms. He called me out of the blue. After nearly a year of silence, no birthdays, no holidays, not even a text on Mother's Day, just silence. The kind that doesn't echo. It just settles. I had trained myself to stop hoping, to stop glancing at my phone every time it buzzed, to stop wondering what I had done wrong or what I had failed to do right. And then, just like that, the phone rang. His name lit up the screen like a ghost I hadn't dared to summon. "Mom," he said, softly, like nothing had happened. Like we hadn't spent the last few years drifting apart like land after an earthquake. "We're throwing a birthday party for Ellie this weekend. Would be great if you could come." Just like that. No apologies, no explanations, just an offer. A warm one, wrapped in enough sweetness to melt every ounce of caution I had. My heart skipped. There's a sound it makes, a flutter, when you hear your child say your name, like it still means something. I hadn't heard it in so long I forgot what it felt like. And I let myself believe, because that's what mothers do. He told me Ellie had been asking about me, that she missed the oatmeal cookies I used to bake when she was little, the ones with the cinnamon glaze and the little crackled tops. "Remember those?" he said, laughing a little, as if the memory was still warm for him too. I said yes, of course I did. I didn't tell him I still had the recipe written in fading ink on a note card tucked inside my favorite cookbook. The one with the chocolate stains and torn corners. Or that I had made those cookies just last month. For no one in particular, just in case. Just to remember what it felt like to be needed. He asked if I'd be free Friday morning, said he'd swing by to pick me up and take me to their place. They'd reserved a little garden cafe for Ellie's party. He made it all sound so normal, so casual, like this was how things had always been. And for a moment I let myself step back into that version of life. The one where I still had a place at the table, the one where I was still Mom, not some faded figure in the background of his perfect little family. He made me feel like I still belonged, and I believed him. God help me, I did. I pulled out my good navy dress, the one I keep in plastic because it still makes me feel put together. I laid it across the bed with care, pressed it myself, even though the iron's cord was fraying and I had to hold the button down just right. I set out a scarf I'd knit for Ellie last Christmas but never got to send. A soft lilac yarn, gentle as spring. And when I zipped up my suitcase, I slid in an old photo, just one. Me and Darren standing in the kitchen, flour on our noses, his arm around my waist, both of us laughing. He still had braces then, still liked holding my hand in public, still thought I hung the moon. I didn't pack the photo to give it to him, I knew better. I packed it to remind myself that once, even just once, I was the center of his world, and that meant something. There's something strange about preparing for a trip when you're older. You don't just pack things, you say goodbye to them, touch them like you might not see them again, water the plants slower, close the fridge door a little softer, because hope at this age is a fragile thing. You don't dare carry too much of it at once. It might break open in your hands. But that night I did carry it. I didn't sleep much, not because I was anxious, but because I was full of something I hadn't felt in years: anticipation. Not for medicine refills, not for a weather change, but for a person, my son, my granddaughter, my family. I laid there in the quiet of my little apartment, imagining Ellie's laugh, the candles on the cake, the feel of her arms around me. It all felt so real, so close, so possible, and that was the cruelest part. I didn't know it then, but I wasn't packing for a reunion. I was walking straight into a test I didn't sign up for, and he already knew how it would end. But still, I believed him, because hope, even after all this time, is the last part of a mother that dies. The next morning came too quickly. I had barely slept, but I was up before the sun, dressed, packed, standing by the front door with my scarf looped twice, just the way Ellie used to do it for me when she was little. My suitcase sat upright by my side, wheels clean, handle extended. I had polished the zippers the night before. It sounds silly now, but I wanted everything to look right, put together, like I still mattered. 8 a.m. was the time he gave me. By 8:13, I was already checking the window, telling myself to be patient. 5 minutes when you're waiting for someone you love, it feels like 50. He pulled up at 8:28, no apology, just loud music, rolled down windows, sunglasses on like it was just another day. I stepped outside with a small wave. He didn't get out, didn't move, didn't even pop the trunk until I was already halfway down the sidewalk, just tapped the steering wheel like he was in a rush to be anywhere else. I opened the back, lifted my suitcase in, felt that familiar sting in my knees, the one I usually hide, but I didn't say anything. I smiled, because that's what mothers do, even when we feel the shift, even when something inside us whispers, this is not how it should be. He drove fast, too fast for a morning like that. We didn't talk much. He said something about traffic, about the caterer being a disaster, about needing to swing by and grab coffee before heading home to set up for the party. We pulled up to the side entrance of the station. Not the main drop-off, not where the other families were getting out. Just a quiet, slightly cracked curb where no one would see. He leaned over and said, "Your ticket's already handled. Just head inside, Mom. Train's on schedule. I'll meet you back at the house." No hug, no eye contact. Just that flicker of a smile. The kind people give when they're lying, but don't want to be caught. Then the car rolled forward. I stood there for a second, longer than I should have. The silence after a goodbye that never came. It hits harder than any slam of a door. Inside the station, it was quiet. Old vinyl seats, a dusty vending machine, a wall clock that ticked like it had something to prove. I walked to the counter and gave my name. The woman behind the glass, kind eyes, tired voice, tapped a few keys, then frowned. "Are you sure it was purchased today?" she asked. I nodded instantly. My throat was already tightening. She checked again. "No reservation under that name. Nothing booked to this destination." I reached into my purse. No paper ticket, no email, phone at 3% battery, no charger, no printout. I sat down. First for 5 minutes, then 10, then 30. No call, no message, no James. I told myself he got delayed, that maybe the ticket would be emailed any minute now, that maybe I had misunderstood. But an hour passed, and then another. I walked outside, hope still clinging to me like a coat that didn't fit anymore. No silver SUV, no coffee cup, just an empty curb and a sky that had begun to turn. That was the moment it sank in. There was no ticket, there was no party, there was no mistake. There was just a son, my son, who had driven me to a train station with no intention of seeing me again. He hadn't forgotten me. No, he had planned it. And that truth, that quiet, sharp, deliberate truth, cut deeper than any loud betrayal ever could. My phone had died an hour ago. The last thing it showed was the time, 11:42 a.m., and then nothing. Just a black screen, like the silence had finally taken form. I had sat on that same cold bench for hours, the kind with no cushion, no warmth, just metal against bone. My knees throbbed. My fingers were stiff from gripping my coat. My pride, what little I had left, was folded up quietly in my lap next to the useless train ticket that never existed. People came and went, some with kids, some with briefcases, some with headphones, drowning in their own worlds. No one looked at me, and somehow, that hurt more than if they had. I wasn't a mother. I wasn't a person who'd been left behind. I was just an old woman sitting in a train station with no destination. I stood up slowly, joints popping like gravel underfoot, and stepped outside, hoping the air would wake me up from whatever this was. That's when I saw her. A woman, maybe late 60s, maybe early 70s, crossing the street with slow, certain steps. She wore a denim jacket, frayed at the cuffs, and held a small paper cup between both hands. She walked right up to me, eyes soft but steady, and said, "You look like you could use something warm." That's it. No, "Are you okay?" No, "Do you need help?" Just warmth. And God, I hadn't realized how long it had been since someone said something that simple. Her name was Ruth. She owned the bookstore across the street, a small, fading place I hadn't even noticed in the fog of my own unraveling. She didn't ask who I was. Didn't ask why I was standing alone outside a train station, looking like I'd forgotten how to leave. She just handed me the tea, nodded once, and said, "It's nothing fancy, just chamomile, but it helps." I followed her, not because I knew her, but because something in me needed a place that didn't ask me to explain the ache I carried. The bookstore was warm in the way old places are. Smelled like dust, vanilla pages, and time that didn't rush. Stacks of paperbacks tilted like drunk soldiers. A small lamp flickered near the back. She pointed to an old armchair by the window. Deep, sunken, floral print faded from years of sunlight. The kind of chair that holds your body like it remembers the shape of grief. I sank into it, coat still on, purse still in my lap. I didn't speak. I couldn't. She poured more tea, set a second cup beside me, then disappeared behind the counter without a single question. And in that silence, that kind, intentional silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I was being seen, not as a burden, not as someone to be managed, not as someone declining, but simply as a person. Ruth didn't try to fix anything. She didn't offer advice or fill the room with noise. She just gave me presence and warmth and the smallest bit of dignity in a day that had robbed me of all of it. For the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel disposable. I didn't feel invisible. I just felt human, and that, in itself, was a kind of rescue. I came home 2 days later, still carrying the scent of old books in my coat and the bitter trace of Ruth's chamomile tea on my tongue. My apartment felt colder than before, not because of the weather, but because now I saw it differently. It wasn't a home anymore. It was the final place I had left to return to, and even that had started to feel borrowed. I set my suitcase by the door, let my purse slide from my shoulder, and went straight to the filing cabinet in my bedroom. Second drawer, middle folder. Yellow tab with my late husband's initials still in his blocky handwriting. The trust fund file. My fingers didn't tremble, not yet, not even when I opened the envelope and saw it. The withdrawal request. It looked official. Stamped, signed, dated. Except, not by me. The signature was close, too close. The loops were right. The slant was almost perfect, but there was something off. My real signature curves softly at the end. This one ended with a jagged flick, sharp and deliberate. I didn't even need to second-guess it. I knew. James had forged it. He had copied my handwriting, probably from the old birthday cards I used to send Ellie. He knew I always signed them the same way. With love always, Mom. He'd studied them, practiced, perfected it just enough to pass a casual glance. But I wasn't a casual glance. I was the one who held the pen. I knew the difference between me and a version of me crafted by someone who wanted something I never offered. Tucked behind the request was a letter from a family doctor I hadn't seen in over 3 years. A vague assessment. A single paragraph full of words that said everything and nothing. She appears to experience occasional memory lapses, likely related to age and stress. That's all it took. A few soft phrases, a conveniently altered date, a suggestion, not a diagnosis, that I might be slipping. He didn't say I was incompetent. He didn't need to. He just planted a seed, a subtle doubt, enough to grease the wheels of theft. Because that's what this was. Not a misunderstanding, not a concern for my well-being. It was theft, cloaked in care, wrapped in the tone of a loving son doing what's best. And the worst part? I had felt it for months. The way James spoke to me, slower, softer, like I was a child. The way he offered to sort my mail, just to help. The way he always double-checked my stories, my appointments, my finances. Little cuts, tiny digs, all masked as love. It wasn't love. It was control. And this forged document, was the final nail. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't call him. I just sat there, with that fake signature in my lap, and felt something far colder than sadness. Clarity. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't distance. This was a strategy. Planned. Executed. He wanted me out of the way, but not completely gone. Just quiet enough to sign, and silent enough not to notice. He thought I wouldn't check, that I wouldn't know, but I did, and I remembered everything, especially this. The morning after I found the forged signature, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of cold tea and a fire building in my chest. Not the kind that burned fast and wild, but the slow, steady kind that knows exactly where it's going. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't call James. I called David Fenner. My husband's old attorney. The man who used to sit across from us with a pen in one hand and 30 years of legal foresight in the other. David had eyes like granite and a memory like a steel trap. He was there when my husband created the trust. He was there when we signed every clause, every contingency, every fail-safe. And thank God for that. He picked up on the second ring. "Mrs. Halloway," he said, same steady voice, calm as always. "I need to see you," I told him. "I know," he said. "I've kept the folder ready." The folder. He knew. Not what happened, but that something would. My husband, God rest his soul, had seen it coming. Not this exact betrayal, no. But the shape of it, the potential of it. That's why he insisted on a clause. One I'd forgotten until David read it back to me. If any beneficiary attempts to manipulate, deceive, or coerce the trustee, their rights are to be revoked permanently. Reinstatement possible only by unanimous vote of 2 named legal advisors. And both of those advisors? Long deceased. I stared at the words like they were a life raft in open water. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just protection. Written with love. Signed in foresight. David laid out the papers in front of me, my name already printed at the bottom, just waiting for a signature. I picked up the pen, No hesitation, no shaking, I signed. David didn't smile. He wasn't the type. He simply nodded once, picked up the phone, and dialed the financial institution. Calm, surgical, precise. "I'm calling on behalf of Mrs. Holloway," he said. He cited the clause, named the section, identified me as the active trustee. Requested an immediate freeze of all access. By the time he hung up, it was done. No warning, no notice, just silence on James's end. The kind of silence that arrives when a door slams shut and no one on the other side even heard it coming. James had lost access to everything, and I hadn't raised my voice once. I sat back in that old leather chair in David's office, the same one I used to sit in with my husband all those years ago, and let the silence sink in. This wasn't drama. This wasn't vengeance. This was correction, a realignment of power, a return to what was mine, not his to take, not his to steal, not even his to ask for anymore. David stood up, walked me to the door, and placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "You're still the one in control," he said. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, my breath came all the way out. Not because it was over, but because I had finally remembered. I wasn't just someone's mother. I wasn't someone's burden. I was the trustee, the keeper, the one who held the pen. And James had underestimated the quiet kind of woman who signs with conviction and walks away without looking back. A week later, David called again. His voice was even lower this time, more weighted. "There's something you need to see," he said. "I don't want to tell you over the phone." I met him at the same office, same squeaky leather chair, but this time his desk was bare except for a single manila folder, thick, sealed, quiet. He slid it toward me, didn't say a word, just looked at me with that same expression surgeons wear before cutting near something vital. Inside were printed emails, dozens, some between James and his attorney, others between James and someone at the bank. A few with vague subject lines like transition strategy and next steps. But the one that hit hardest was dated 2 weeks before that phone call I thought was a peace offering. "We need to isolate her first, create emotional distance, position it as an invitation, something soft, familiar. Once she shows signs of confusion, we'll document. From there, we propose full transfer of authority, financial, medical, estate. Quietly, smoothly, no need to escalate." I read that paragraph 3 times, not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. That phone call, the one where he said he missed me, the one where he asked me to bring cookies, the one where I cried after hanging up thinking maybe, just maybe, I still mattered to my son, it was a tactic, a decoy. The opening move in a quiet little chess game I never agreed to play. That birthday party? There was no party, just a trap designed to look like a welcome mat. It wasn't a moment of healing. It was the first stage of strategic erasure. They wanted to make me doubt myself, to wear me down, to isolate me emotionally and physically, so that by the time they moved to seize control, I wouldn't have the strength or clarity to fight back. That train station wasn't a mistake. It was a test to see if I'd panic, forget details, lose track of names, dates, times. Because if I did, they could claim I was slipping, that I needed help, that I couldn't be trusted with the very life I had built. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about power, control, silencing the woman who still had her name on the paperwork. I sat there in David's office, holding those printed emails in hands that refused to shake. Not because I wasn't devastated, but because devastation had hardened into something sharper, clarity. This hadn't happened overnight. It had been in motion for months, maybe years, little comments, subtle gaslighting, a campaign waged in lowercase tones and legal jargon. James hadn't just betrayed me. He had rehearsed it, drafted it, had lawyers draft contingency plans for my mind before I had ever stumbled. And I had baked cookies. I had polished my shoes, pressed my dress, waved goodbye at a train station not knowing I was never meant to arrive. I closed the folder and looked at David. Is there anything else? He shook his head. No, just that the bank's internal review confirms the forgery. You're fully protected now. I nodded. Protected. Not safe. Not whole. But no longer unguarded. And that was something. I didn't cry. Not then. Not there. Because once you realize the people you love have studied your weaknesses like a roadmap, you stop handing out directions. I woke up that morning before the alarm. The sky was still gray, not stormy, just undecided. The kind of gray that doesn't threaten rain, but makes you carry an umbrella anyway. I took my time getting dressed. Not for anyone else, not to impress, just for me. Pressed slacks, a blouse I hadn't worn in months, the necklace with a single pearl, the one my husband gave me for our 30th anniversary. It sat just above my collarbone, like a memory I had made peace with. Then I walked to the bank, not the closest one, the one downtown, the one James always used, where he used to shake hands with the branch manager like he belonged there. I entered through the side door, quiet, unassuming, asked for the senior associate, gave my name, waited. She came out in a navy pantsuit, polite and professional, didn't ask questions, just smiled and led me into a small private office with frosted glass. I handed her the papers David had helped me finalize, closure of the old trust account, removal of all secondary signatories, transfer of all funds to a new account under one name only, mine. She reviewed everything carefully, stamped here, signed there, asked if I wanted to leave a note of explanation on the old file. I said no. No explanations, no warnings, no closure letters, just finality. I even removed Ellie's name. Not out of spite. God knows I love that little girl more than I can put into words. But she's still young, still swimming in his version of things, still listening to stories told in kitchens behind closed doors. And the truth? She isn't ready for it. Not yet. Love doesn't mean giving access to everything. Sometimes, love means waiting until the person you love can hold the full weight of the truth, without letting it crush them. Until then, I hold it for her. When everything was signed and filed, the banker handed me a slim folder. Clean, new, mine. She smiled. Is there anything else I can help with? I shook my head, stood, tucked the folder into my purse like it was a piece of myself finally returned. On the way out, I passed the teller counter. The young man behind the glass smiled politely. He looked about 20, clean-cut, kind eyes. Reminded me of a boy James used to coach in Little League. Same posture, same eagerness, but this one hadn't learned to pretend yet. Outside, the wind had picked up. I pulled my coat tighter and walked 3 blocks down to a small bakery I used to love. Bought a single apple tart, still warm. The woman behind the counter wrapped it in wax paper. Added a napkin without being asked. I said thank you, and meant it. At home, I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, ate slowly. Let the tart flake into my fingers without apology. It tasted clean. Not too sweet, not desperate for anything. That afternoon, I received a letter. Handwritten, neatly folded. No return address, but I didn't need one. It was from James. Apologetic in tone, of course. Soft language, misunderstanding, stress, concern for your well-being. He danced around the truth like it might bite him if he stood too close. Not once, did he admit to forging my name. Not once did he acknowledge the emails, the strategy, the deliberate abandonment. He wrote of love, of wanting to rebuild, of clearing the air. I folded the letter, slid it back into its envelope, placed it in the back of the filing cabinet behind our old tax records, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. A quiet wait. A line I wouldn't uncross again. I didn't reply, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because he already knew. He knew when the bank froze the account. He knew when his calls stopped going through. He knew when I didn't show up angry, but absent. I had signed everything back to me, and I didn't need his permission to keep it.
I didn't sue. Didn't call the police. Didn't show up screaming on his doorstep, like the movies always suggest women do when they've been wronged. I didn't even answer his letter. I just filed it away, next to the old tax returns and appliance manuals. Things that used to matter, but no longer require attention. Because I finally understood something. Not everything broken needs to be fixed. Some things just need to be walked away from, with your spine straight and your heart intact. I didn't take revenge. I didn't want to. Revenge requires energy. Energy I no longer give to people who try to silence me, reshape me, or strip me of my place in the story. What I needed wasn't victory, it was clarity. And now I had it. Like sunlight through a dirty window that suddenly makes everything sharp again. I know what he tried to do. He wanted control. Not out of malice, maybe, but out of entitlement. The kind of entitlement that grows when people mistake silence for weakness. But he forgot. I buried a husband, raised a child, rebuilt a life in the quiet corners most people overlook. I don't need to make noise to prove I'm still here. I am the noise, just softer than he knows how to hear. I reclaimed what was mine, not with court battles or public shame, but with a pen, a folder, and the kind of stillness that frightens people who expect you to collapse. And I didn't do it for him, or to punish him. I did it so I could sit at my kitchen table, pour a cup of tea, and not feel like a stranger in my own life anymore. Sometimes strength doesn't look like a roar. It looks like knowing when to close a door and never open it again. It looks like deleting voicemails, cooking dinner for one, sleeping peacefully through the night, not because nothing hurts anymore, but because you've stopped inviting the hurt to dinner. What stays? The truth, the knowing, the quiet dignity of walking away before they realize you were never asking for permission in the first place. I didn't lose anything, not really, because what mattered, my voice, my memory, my place, was never his to take. And sometimes, the strongest kind of power isn't in taking something back, but in remembering you never truly lost it.